Hello everyone and welcome along to a bit of an impromptu Tuesday night edition of the TII podcast. My name is Craig Dennett and I'm your host this evening on the day that Rangers released their annual report and accounts. Plenty of headlines coming out of it and plenty of big talking points as well. I'm joined by our very own Tommy McIntyre to have a look at it. We're also joined by football finance expert Kieran Maguire. How are you doing, Kieran?
I'm all good. I'm a Brighton fan, and football's still pretty exciting for us. But then we're a club that has relatively low expectations, and that's both a positive and a negative.
Yes, absolutely. I would give a lot, to be honest, to play the type of football that Brighton play these days. Very different to the type of football we're seeing at Ibrox currently, but that's a discussion for another day. We're also joined by Tommy McIntyre. How are you doing, Tommy?
Yeah, you did well to make that not seem like an afterthought after introducing Kieran. That's absolutely fine. I am not a Brighton fan, but I've just settled for decent football at this point in time coming out of Ibrox. That's probably fair. Let's stick to the numbers, not the football today. Let's stick to the numbers.
Absolutely. So, Kieran, the accounts were released 5:00 this evening, I believe. Headline, I guess, is the £17 million post-tax loss, which on the face of it doesn't look very good. But some, I think, are reading further into the accounts and seeing that Rangers are making a start to sort of move in the right direction. Can you just give us a bit of a top-line summary of your view of the accounts?
Right. If you're a business and you've been going for a long time and you're losing 300 grand a week, that's not good news. So I think that the results are not good. At the same time, they're in line with expectations. In terms of you've got to make progress both on and off the pitch in terms of the money coming in. The money coming into the club, I think, is a positive in the sense that broadcast income was down, but not significantly so, given it wasn't a great European year last year. As far as ticket sales were concerned, record levels of revenue from ticket sales, up 10% on the previous year. I'm always going to contrast to England. In England, in the Premier League, £1 in every 7 comes from ticket sales. For Rangers, it's £1 in every 2, and I think that's indicative of two things. First of all, Rangers fans will turn up every single week to watch their team, which is a credit to them. Secondly, the Scottish TV deal is not worth very much money, so the club is dependent on A, getting into Europe, and B, progressing in Europe. But what we are seeing increasingly is a two-tier system when it comes to the rewards of European football. And you have to go an awful long way in the Europa League to even match a mediocre season in the Champions League. And I think that's going to be the challenge for a club. So that's the issue in terms of the money coming in. The wage bill was down, but you'd expect the wage bill to be down because they wouldn't be paying out bonuses in terms of achievements. Where Rangers did well in 22-23 was, if you take a look at any football club, the money that comes into the club, it's ticket sales, it's broadcasting, it's commercial deals. Those are pretty solid as far as Rangers are concerned. But your fourth wheel is player trading, and I know I'll probably get into trouble for saying this. Celtic are very good at selling one player a season and bringing in normally somewhere in the region of 18 to 25 million pounds a year. If Rangers want to match Celtic in terms of their ability to recruit players, then they've got to be in a position where they can sell players as well. They did very well in 22-23, less so in 23-24. And if that puts you at a £20 million deficit, that's an awful lot that's a big big gap to make up.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on plenty of points there that we'll delve a bit deeper into as we go through this podcast. But Tommy, just from a fan perspective, what was your view of it when you had the £17 million loss? Obviously, moving from I think it was just over £4 million the previous year. That seems like quite a significant difference on the face of it. What was your view from a fan perspective?
Yeah, well, it's a headline grabber. And if anybody's out there comparing net losses and stuff like that as well with other clubs, some clubs do it on a gross basis, some do it on a net basis. It's really important to understand that differential if people are comparing apples and pears sometimes, because lots of people like to do that. But listen, it's very much the same as the playing squad. It's probably the best analogy I could make. And Kieran's given a great synopsis there of some of the tangible headlines, which is much like the playing squad, it's gone through a refresh. So nobody's comfortable with that 17.2 million, right, net loss. It's also unsustainable. Then you look at it and you say, right, operating costs are down as well, although you can make the argument that operating losses haven't actually dropped that much at a core level. What they've done is they've been able to bring in more income and it kind of covers some of it, but that's maybe getting overly technical this early. Ultimately, the club still needs to do what Philippe Clement's doing to the team on the pitch, which is refresh and rebuild. This is probably, I don't know, let's call it year 2 of that type of thing. And there's another journey. The accounts next year will be impacted, obviously, with the CL exit. And so there'll be some numbers there as well. I'm with Kieran. I think the drop in the wage bill speaks to the Niels Koppen kind of work as well in terms of getting some big players out the door because our recruitment hasn't been great. We all know that in the markets we've been fishing in. We need to see dividends from that and get back to that point of, right, we can actually supplant the balance sheet with a big sale. Now, do you look about our squad and say that there's a big sale in the offing right now from anybody in there? Don't think you naturally would. And so that's going to have to iterate. So you're still going to be staring at some numbers. The only thing I'd maybe draw out as well is some of the commercial aspects too, in that, yeah, Karim Varane and his team are doing really well, but there's an element of topping out somewhere within the domestic market, because I think you've pushed the costs of the ticketing as far as it can go. And so therefore other markets are going to be, and I know the club are looking at foreign markets as well. And maybe Kieran will keep us right on the differential there between what's palatable down south from a ticket perspective. But as Kieran said, our TV revenue, especially if you're not in CL, is absolutely important and impacted. You compare that or ally that to the fact that you've pushed your ticket price as far as you can, then you're still looking at some difficult numbers, but it definitely is getting iteratively better, but it's not like over the horizon yet or anything like that. Would probably be the long answer to, still got a way to go.
Yeah, definitely still a way to go. Kieran, the Chief Financial Officer, James Taylor, put out a video on the club's social media channels just after the announcement was made. He was given a bit of colour, I guess, to the headlines and the narrative that the club wanted to put out. One of the first things he talks about is over £93 million of revenue. When you include the sale of the Albion, it makes it £94 million in revenue. He describes that as stunning performance from the commercial aspect of the football club. Is that a statement that you would agree with?
I don't think I'd use the word stunning. I think it's decent. It's not spectacular. The commercial team have worked hard, and I think we'll see a further increase as far as the money coming into the club is concerned for 24-25, especially if they do make some progress. And the more matches you have at Ibrox, if you've especially in cup competitions where you can charge day ticket prices as opposed to season ticket prices, but you've got to get that pricing right, because if you've got 5,000 or 10,000 empty seats, especially for some of the group games against opposition who are not going to turn heads, then that's tough. So yeah, certainly some of the commercial deals that we've seen being quoted in recent times is good. I think it shows the appeal to sponsors and commercial partners of the club. As Tommy was hinting at, internationalizing or globalizing Rangers as a brand, and it's a horrible word to use because you didn't fall in love with a brand. You fell in love with a shirt, and that shirt is far more important than a brand for any fan of any club. But you look at some clubs, Manchester City, for example, bring in £350 million of sponsorship income a year, and we're looking at Rangers bringing in 20. And if you talk to people, are Rangers as big a bigger club as Manchester City? You would say, yeah, historically, you would say that they were. Manchester City's success has come relatively recent, but success in the right competitions, which pay the big bucks, it generates the huge differential that we see here.
Yeah, well, obviously we mentioned there the revenue. James Taylor described it as stunning. You described it as decent. Where does it then go wrong to reach that final bottom line figure of a 17 million or 17.1 million pound loss?
Well, the wage bill was down. Sort of the general overheads have crept up. That is a cause for concern. I've not done a full breakdown, but they do seem to be reasonably high in terms of your player costs, transfer fee costs, the way that they're treated. Those are okay. The interest costs on the loans doubled. Now it's only from £2 million to £4 million, but the club did borrow substantial amounts of money to underwrite those losses. That's not sustainable on a long-term basis unless Rangers move to a different ownership style. For want of a better phrase, a sugar daddy style that we see quite frequently south of the border. But Rangers have got shareholders and investors who have been, John Bennett and others have put money into the club, and that has been gratefully received. But it's been more due to having to do it rather than being a billionaire who's got spare cash around and is therefore in a position to say, I can write off 200 million quid, as we see in many other clubs, A, throughout Europe, and B, I think most consciously south of the border. I think the biggest problem that Rangers have, ironically, isn't Celtic, it's the Premier League, because the Premier League sucks so much of the interest in terms of broadcasters and sponsors and advertisers that there's not much left for the SPFL, and therefore getting into the Champions League is absolutely it's desirable but not essential, but it's very, very desirable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll come back to the Champions League and the European football point in a second. But Tommy, before I do, it seemed to be that sort of bringing down the pre-player trading loss from 10.5 million to 2 million was kind of the success story that the club was pushing. Is that the case in your eyes in terms of where real progress has been made? John Bennett had obviously made a priority during his time as chairman. Do you view that as one of the success stories that can be picked out from these accounts?
Broadly, yeah. But I go back to my earlier point of, and much like Kieran, I've not had a chance to absolutely work through every single facet of it. But there's a difference between saying you've reduced costs in and of themselves, and a separate thing where you say the costs look reduced because we brought in more income. And actually core operating, I think I'm with you, Kieran. I think that's crept slightly up, which puts us in a similar position to what John Bennett was really worried about. And so, yeah, you need to be very careful about how those figures are actually displayed and deployed. I don't think anybody's trying anything nefarious there. It's just been the presentation of the figures. But I still think there's some work to do. It is a success story because it's driven by the commercial income aspect to it. So kudos to Karim Varane and his team being able to do deals in there and have a bit more sustainability of their deals rather than some of the ad hoc nature of things that we'd had previously. But I mean, again, these are still a story for a wider vista. they're a story of the fact that we have continually wasted money since we came back up. We've had a few cracks at this, and I think that these are the first accounts where I think we're really on the right track, right? And there's an element of potential to sustainability, but we're still in a non-normal position or a suboptimal position, which is relying on different funding streams, having some of that debt at different rates, not being able to completely control our cost base. And that leads to exactly what Kieran said at the very start of this call, which is, that's not where a business wants to be. What you want to do is have capital reserves, be able to act really quickly, be acquisitive if that's your type of thing in terms of players. But you only get that. Just to be really clear, Rangers will only get to that either if it's the sugar daddy, which nobody wants because we've had our fingers burnt with that, or we successfully engineer the player trading model to bring in big revenue, because that's the only two ways, right? Yeah, you need to be in CL and all that, but that's pretty much it. So a lot is resting on Niels Kopp and his team and the board's plan in there. And probably what they also need to do is make sure that they appoint the right senior people now in terms of a CEO, etc., because we're still waiting on that type of thing. So I come back to it. Decent in parts, still with some legacy problems, still focused on everything the fan base know about, which is got to get player trading right, been shopping in the wrong markets, overpaying for players who have not performed, having to get out of those deals, including managers. Still got a bit to go in there and need to see the shoots of it pretty quickly, unfortunately. That's the pressure into the system.
Yeah, before we go on to talk about the player trading model, Kieran, one of the things that also struck me was the amount we earned from winning the Europa League group that we did, and also sort of entering that round of 16 where we were put out. But the previous year, we'd actually earned more money by entering the Champions League and getting 0 points. In terms of these accounts, do you think they show the importance of Champions League football to a club like Rangers, and how, I guess a lot of Rangers fans, most Rangers fans will believe actually the Europa League is our level, and the Champions League seems almost a step beyond where we can really compete these days? How do Rangers become sustainable without that Champions League money, but still have the ability to compete?
You do that by creating a virtuous circle. First of all, qualifying for the Champions League. Now, to get into the knockout phase of the Champions League, you need realistically 9 points from 8 games. If you take a look at some of the clubs who are from elsewhere in Europe, Rangers are capable of beating those sides. And I know nothing about football. I teach footballers. I teach football managers. I don't know
if you're having a go at Brighton there or not, Kieran.
No. The more I talk to the professionals in the game, the more I realise that what I consider to be knowledge is in fact just completely facile. It's a bit like saying that I understand medicine because I watch Holby City. I'm fortunate that I'm now working sort of in the periphery of the industry, and I'm finding out just how clueless I am. But looking at the resources that Rangers would have compared to some of the other clubs in Europe who are now occupying the last 10 to 12 positions in the Champions League table under this Swiss model, Rangers can pick up points there. But they, of course, in order to do that, they need to win the Scottish Premiership. And in order to win the Scottish Premiership, they need to have a squad which is competitive against Celtic. And Celtic have got the advantage that they are in the Champions League, which means that they can sign more players and that they can pay more competitive wages on the back of that, should they wish to do so. So it's getting everything in alignment to be competitive on the pitch. And looking at these numbers, and Tommy and I have both commented upon the fact that the wage bill is starting to go down. Well, that's good looking at it through the eyes of an accountant, but through the eyes of a football fan, you say with the wage bills going down, then the quality of the players we're recruiting is going down, and therefore the ability to compete in a division where, well, let's be honest, finishing second is finishing nowhere. As far as you're concerned, and the others, the other club in Glasgow is concerned, it's a non-position. So it's a real challenge, and especially if one club qualifies for the Champions League 2, 3, 4 seasons in a row, that financial difference can become a chasm.
Tommy, how much of a concern is it, I guess, when we look at the coefficient for Scottish clubs and the risk that, firstly, automatic Champions League qualification becomes a thing of the past, but then the opportunity for two clubs to get the chance to try and qualify for the Champions League also becomes diminished? How much of a concern is that as we look forward, when really the monetary prize from the Champions League is almost what it feels like we need over a couple of seasons to right the ship a little bit, but then the opportunities become less and less. How much of a concern is that when you look at the accounts as they are?
Yeah, well, I won't duplicate what Kieran said in terms of the importance of CL money. I absolutely agree with every word of that. You're only asking me that question because of how far behind we are at the moment on the pitch. Because if we were guaranteed that one spot, we wouldn't give a monkeys who was getting the second one. Right? That's the tribalistic nature of it, quite rightly. Should we care about that because we might be second for a while, depending on what happens, right? Or try and overhaul? Then yeah, we should, because we need to access that pot of money, right? That's the absolute definitive there. By hook or by crook, we got to be getting some of that CL pie, particularly if Celtic are accessing that, as Kieran was saying, 2, 3, 4 times. That leap that they make financially is something that we aren't able to bridge right now. Particularly when they, you get the TV money split and stuff like that as well. So we've got to find the route into that. It comes back to the non-virtuous circle, if I take the opposite position to Kieran here, which is we're in a cycle of we've overinvested in areas that's not worked out because of bad structural decision-making, bad on-field decision-making, all that type of stuff, right? Now we find ourselves behind our rivals, hoping that via a refreshed player trading model and uplifted commercials, we can then get that third wheel on, which is getting into the CL and driving some of that money. But it all comes back to on the pitch all over again. So you're either going to have to take a chance at some point, or you're going to have to let Niels Coppin and his team try and work miracles. Maybe not getting into the Champions League, which creates that non-virtuous cycle as well. So I don't want to sound overly negative. It's just, you need to look at the figures realistically and understand the circumstance, which says there's only so much that can be done via commercial deals for a team in the Scottish Premiership, right? There is only so much that can be done by a TV deal that's relatively small and paltry compared to other nations. There is only so much that fronting up investors, underwriting loans into equity, etc., is going to get you. You finally have to get to the point of you're selling players on the regular for big fees, right? And by that, I mean double digit. I should say eight digits, not just 2 digits, right? But 8 right in there, right? But you've got to do that in the regular, and you've got to be accessing Europe's premier competition because the money that's involved there. So that's it. That's as far as that conversation needs to get. The problem that maybe the fans are facing into right now is we're seeing the product on the pitch not be anywhere near good enough to give us any confidence that that part's going to come online anytime soon.
Yeah. Kieran, a big part of the narrative on this and the way forward is on that player trading model. I guess we've seen various different ways of doing it. We've seen how Celtic have done it across the city. We've seen how Brighton have done it really well, your own club, over recent years to build that team of youthful, promising players. We've seen clubs like Brentford who use data and stuff like that as well behind their recruitment model. Where have other clubs found success in your eyes, and what can Rangers learn from them?
There's an acknowledgement, I think, from some of the other clubs that you've mentioned, is that they can't be bigger, so they have to be smarter. And you can get the data from Opta-Joe, you can get the data from StatsBomb. It's available to all clubs, but just because you give lots of people a piano doesn't make them a piano player. And therefore it's having people at the club who can understand what will make a difference in being able to spot metrics for a player, but also to have a culture of the club. This is the way that Rangers are going to play football, regardless of who the coach is. And the coach is brought in. You set the style of football through your director of football or whoever is going to be in charge of the football side of the business. You have a coach who is employed to apply that style of football, and you recruit the players who have the skills to also. They might not be good at different type of football, but this is going to be the Rangers way. So, I support Brighton. I know how Brighton are going to play football, and we've lost 2 coaches recently, but we're still 6th in the Premier League. We've beaten Manchester United. We've won at Newcastle. We've drawn at Spurs. We've beaten Arsenal. So we've drawn at Arsenal. We've beaten Spurs. Clubs with far greater resources than us. So that's what Rangers are going to have to do. They're going to have to be smarter, and that means they're going to have to invest in understanding the boring things about data analytics and so on. And that's not cheap. And also, it's not quick. And in a city where a fortnight is a huge period of time in terms of results, that's the problem you've got. The fan base is impatient, and I absolutely understand that. But nobody wants to be told you need to go and sit back and let us work it through the system for the next 2 or 3 years, because we've had so many broken promises as football fans and in life in general when people say that to us. But I don't really see any alternative, because the playing budget is not as big as Celtic's. There is only one place for the Champions League. So if you can't be bigger than Celtic in terms of having that budget, then you've got to be smarter.
Yeah, absolutely. Just sticking with you, Kieran, there's been a lot of rumours, I guess.
Sorry, apologies for breaking in there, Craig, but just to add just one thing to Kieran's words there. The most important person that comes out of these accounts is Niels Coppin, for exactly those reasons that Kieran's just pointing out there. So managers can come and go, and we all wish Philippe Clement success and his tenure at Ibrox. Finance directors come and go, etc. Board members, as we well know, depart. Right? But there's a lot of emphasis put on Niels Coppin and his strategy for player selection and identification, and then bringing them in the development behind the scenes of that kind of pathway and consistency to make sure we have that conveyor belt. So much emphasis in there. I mean, it maybe doesn't say it in black and white, but yeah, anybody who reads it, there's a lot being placed on the shoulders of Niels Coppin and his team. Yeah,
there absolutely is. And if there wasn't pressure already, there definitely is now on his shoulders. Kieran, sorry, just sticking with you. There's a lot of focus on external investment as well. The club saying the accounts the plans to raise £8.6 million of equity in there. There's been a lot of rumours in the Scottish media about potential investors as well. How important, I guess, as well, going back to the point Tommy made there, we're a club with investors who are committed and continue to be committed to putting more money into the club. But how important is it for Rangers to potentially find new investment and additional investment to what's already there?
Well, if any business is losing money, then you've only got 2 choices. And it's just like we have on in terms of our personal finances. You sell the things that you own, which reduces the things that you own, or you either borrow or get money from some form of, from family or friends or whatever. And I think that's the route that Rangers are going down, but they're probably going down both. I sense that, having seen the video from the club, that belt tightening is taking place. And trying to do that without further reducing the quality of what you're seeing on the pitch and making Rangers competitive to win the Scottish Premiership is a hell of a balancing act. So having third-party investment come in is good. But if I was a third-party investor, I say, well, who's in charge of the club? Who's the chairman? Who's the chief executive? What are relations like at board level? And I don't know enough about the club. But I'll be honest. I'm south of the border, but I'm reading occasional stories that there's not always a lot of harmony. And if you don't have a board which is 100% in alignment, then it's very difficult to put through any strategy of any business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just highlights the importance of getting people into those senior roles which have been vacant for so long at the club. Tommy, there were a lot of mentions of the Copeland Road works, of playing at Hampden, of the loss to Dynamo Kyiv. It felt like that was maybe laying the groundwork a little bit to say we're up against it this year. Is that what you took from that?
I think that narrative's been out there for quite a while, just by the product that's been on the pitch, to be honest with you. But you're right. But the Kyiv stuff will impact us next year. We'll see that in terms of those accounts as well, and that will definitely show up because it had a dramatic impact. The Copeland Road works. Yet, listen, anything that is designed to help supporters, disabled supporters, etc., is a good spend in my opinion. However, you're not going to see tangible income benefits from that anytime soon. So yeah, that's a balancing act, and I think personally, the kind of board got that right. Look after your fans as much as you possibly can, and increase access. Some spends are just worth it. I think just going back to what Kieran was saying as well, one good thing that I think has come out, through conversations at the club and in the accounts, there's a clear understanding that our previous recruitment policy of picking up players from down south and what is, no matter where you're shopping, is already an inflated market, and hoping that they would come up here and do good was a very, very tricky market for us and had more losses than successes. And we've stepped away from that a little bit, and that's why we've spread our net a little bit wider in terms of people like Hefty and all that coming in, and Oscar Cortez, although he's injured at the moment, but that type of thing. There's definitely a more focused part to that. But yeah, the elements remain exactly the same in terms of there are absolute challenges. We've spent some money. You get things like New Edmiston House, I think, turned a £500,000 profit in the accounts and stuff like that. These are good things, but they do not turn anybody sitting bolt upright immediately. To Kieran's point, to your point, it takes time. And so what people might be facing into is we just maybe don't have the ammunition right now. And so you either get creative and you find gems and that all works for you and aligns, or you're in for a bumpy road for quite a while. And in terms of the investment stuff from other people, and I kind of allude to Kieran's point here about board harmony, I think more could certainly be done at that level to harmonise the board conversation. But that's why it's so important to fill those C-suite positions that you talk about, and having them run for so long is not indicative of a well-run oiled machine. For that public-facing element, you want to fill those positions really quickly and have that succession plan. Kind of speaks to the fact that Rangers get caught in the hop with James Bisgrove leaving. But there's got to be some normality at some point, and then that feeds through into, right, who's maybe the next best person to invest money. But again, you want to move away in the long term from people fronting up with money and be a sustainable club that generates a profit and has a bank of assets, players that can be readily sold, having contributed to a successful team on the pitch. We are still just to be really clear, quite far away from that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Kieran, final question just to round off the podcast. And we're going to try and round it off on a positive note if we possibly can.
That's why you've not asked me. Yes, yeah.
And I know what route Tommy will go down. So I'll come to you, Kieran. Where are the seeds of hope? Where are the little bits that come out of these accounts where Rangers fans can cling on to and see potential for the future?
Well, there has been a greater investment in the squad more than any other time in the club's history. Now, it could be that investment will start to see a return in due course. I think you've got to cling on to that. I can't comment on what you're seeing on the pitch. I don't watch enough Scottish football to do that. The wages are under control. There is no indication that Rangers are anywhere near the limits of the UEFA breaches in terms of how much money you can spend. So there is flexibility, and if you've got flexibility, that means that you can make the right decision. I think the club, as Tommy was alluding to, has learnt the lessons of the past. You shouldn't be looking to recruit players at ages 26, 27, 28. You've got to acknowledge that if you go for younger players, spot the good talent, bring them in at younger ages, and then, and this is the frustration thing, because potentially you are looking to progress in the Premiership and therefore qualify for the Champions League. You need to be moving on one decent player a year to then provide the funds to go and do the next round of recruitment. So let's be honest, the results are not good because the club's losing money. It's only sustainable because of the support of lenders, but it can spend money if it sees the opportunities, because it's not being prevented from doing so by the cost control rules.
Yeah, and I think we'll draw the podcast to a close there. So, Kieran, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. It's very much appreciated. Tommy, same to yourself. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please do drop a like on the video. It helps us massively. Please also subscribe to the TII YouTube channel or wherever you get your audio podcast from, whether that's Spotify, Apple Music, or anywhere else. Plenty more podcasts coming up from us, and we're back tomorrow night as with an immediate post-match reaction as we take on Aberdeen at Pittodrie. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Until next time. Goodbye.